Bobblehead. Okay. Princess Steps, spring 2023, and it definitely feels like spring now, doesn't it? So thank you for that. And this is week 8. It is back off week. And I just want to remind everyone, because the weather is so nice, you can all guess what has changed in Riverfront Park. It's a lot busier. And it's very, very relevant to remind ourselves about safety for everyone here, safety for the general park users, and respect and common courtesy. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This group can be intimidating. That's not a bad thing per se, but we are big and we are a lot of, people, so we just want to be aware of the park users. And sometimes there's people that aren't as aware, whether they're little kids on tricycles, not really paying attention, or whether they're adults with dogs with leashes not shortened enough or whatever.
Big dogs.
Yeah, big dogs, little dogs. So just a reminder to really communicate with one another and have a little extra awareness, and patience maybe might not be a bad thing also out there, because we don't want to get a bad rap for having the numbers and all that kind of stuff. So with that, John is our guest speaker tonight, and some of you have heard him talk about this injury prevention talk before, but it's never too late to hear it for the first time, and it's always a good thing to have reminders of the things that we can do to prevent injury. So he's going to give a review of certain things and then talk a little bit more, and he's going to leave a little time for Q&A at the end as well, because usually there are some questions. So there you go.
Okay. Hey, spring. Hey.
Finally.
Anybody wearing gloves tonight? Finally leave those at home. First couple weeks, I talked about shoes, and then talked about heart rate and capillary building, and that first stage of oxygen and endurance, and building up your aerobic endurance level. And I said that 8-10 weeks into it, you're going to start feeling a difference. How many people are feeling a difference? Consistency pays off. Huh? All right. So hopefully you're building those capillary beds, and muscles are starting to get a little bit stronger. You have more endurance. Everybody kind of agree to that? You've endured the rain, if nothing else. Right. And the windy conditions and everything else that we've been dealt with this early spring. So that building up that capillary bed, building up the delivery system of blood and oxygen to your muscles, the next stage, I talked about 3 stages in that talk, is muscle development, okay, muscle toning. You'll start noticing that as your muscles and tendons and ligaments are starting to get fed more and more and more with keeping your heart rate down, doing all the princess steps, keeping a conversation pace, that aerobic capacity keeps growing and growing, so then your muscles can get stronger because they're getting what they need, all right? It's also time, that's why we throw in on week 8, back off week. It's also a time that because that aerobic capacity has grown and you're getting more confident, you're feeling better, you're recovering quicker, maybe sleeping better, maybe the resting heart rate dropped a little bit that we talked about, back week 2, week 3. It's also the easy time to overdo it, okay? definitely when the weather has changed dramatically like it just did, it's like, now I can get out there and do it and do more and go faster and go stronger and go longer. And that's when the two injuries that Susan has talked about, the TOOs, too much, too fast, too soon, too hard, too everything, those are the ones that start cropping up, okay? So, what is a running injury, okay, or what is a walking injury? They sneak up on you, all right? It's not like, oh, all of a sudden my knee hurts. No, it kind of aches a little bit. It's sore for a little bit. It's kind of bothersome for a day or two. Then it starts developing into something that hurts, okay? Rarely, unless you like step off a curve or you get hit by a bus or run over by a bicycle or something like that. It's not an acute injury where it's just, okay, something happened just then, okay? More often than not, it's, you know, maybe twisting your ankle on a root or a rock or stepping off a curb sideways or something like that. That's a whole different thing, you know, a strain or a break or something. When we talk about running or walking injuries, aches and pains, there's kind of a way to look at it and monitor how something is feeling rather than, oh my gosh, everything's over, I'm done, my knee hurts and I'm finished, I can't do anything anymore. Rarely is go into that very quickly. Usually it's over the course of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, a little bit overdoing it time after time after time, then that kind of builds up, okay? The back off week, because of the building up for 7 weeks, this is the 8th week. Have you noticed there's a little less time, a little less intensity in the workouts? Okay. A lot of that is not just women's clinic, Princess Steps, you know, tradition of 25 years of training. It actually has an awful lot to do with real training techniques. During like the high school cross country season or the high school track season, you know, kids are building, and then right before districts, coaches back things off a little bit, a little less intensity, let them recover from what's going on. Because the true fitness takes place during recovery, okay? And that doesn't really take place by pushing yourself, and thinking the more I push, the better I'm going to get, the fitter I'm going to get, the stronger I'm going to get. It's only after you taper off a little bit, back off on the intensity, back off on the distance, back off on the time, that's when the training effect actually takes place, okay? And a common mistake that a lot of people make is, boy, every week I feel better, every week I feel stronger, every week I'm going further, to the moon, right? Well, you can't get to the moon. You're gonna crash. So that's why we throw in this week after 8 weeks, or in the 8th week, because we've built back down, and then we build up again. So that when you get to week 12, week 13, 14, 15, after the clinic's over with, you cycled through and back up again, okay? Doing that on a regular basis, you know, every couple months, every 8 to 10 weeks, backing off a little bit, that's gonna do a lot to avoid injuries, avoid those overuse syndromes, avoid the tendon, muscle, joint aches and pains, okay? So when we talk about what's an ache, what's a pain, okay? Ache is it hurts, well, kind of here, well, kind of there, well, kind of underneath my knee, but sometimes it hurts above the knee, right? That's more of just a wandering kind of ache. there's definitely a signal to you that something's a little bit awry. But when you can't really focus on exactly where that point is that it hurts, it's just kind of a general thing. It's just, yeah, like in my quad, something, it just kind of hurts a little bit, or it's tired, just feels heavy. That is the beginning of like an overuse condition, or the start of maybe going into an injury, going into from that ache or heaviness to an actual pain. Okay? The thing that keeps most muscle aches away more than anything else, hydration. Okay? If you've got enough water in you, and if you're well hydrated, most muscle aches and pains just go away. When you've got the heaviness in your legs, either you may have overdone it a little bit, or you could be just dehydrated. Okay, had 3 or 4 cups of coffee today, and 2 cups of wine, or 2 glasses of wine last night, and oh boy, it's 3 o'clock and I haven't had a glass of water yet today. Okay, on days like today, when the temperature goes up real fast, that could lead to some achiness in your muscles, because there's just not enough hydration. I think Susan talked about it during the rolling out session. You know, if you pour water on a rock, what's the water do? It just kind of runs right off, okay? But if you pour water in a sponge, it absorbs it, uses it, okay, gathers that water. When your muscles are hydrated, then they're more spongy, okay? They're going to absorb the water, absorb the nutrients, keep the blood flow going, keep the oxygen going, okay? Joints tend to be the place that hurt, that you notice the most aches or pains, and the conditions that start happening, okay? The overuse things. Anything around the joint, and we talked about this on that 3rd week when I had the 3 stages, that second stage of building the muscles, as the muscles get stronger, they start tugging a little bit on tendons, on joints, on the connective tissues. Your tendons, your ligaments, cartilage, they don't get as much blood flow. Okay, so if the muscles are getting overdeveloped or overused, they're going to start tugging on the attachments. The attachments are those tendons, the cartilage, the ligaments around the joints. So oftentimes it's in the ankle, it's in the knee, sometimes up and down the shins. Those are the places that you start feeling those aches and pains. Okay? You start feeling something. What's your first reaction? Panic? Or, okay, what's going on? Right? Think it through a little bit. Did you overdo it? You know, well, I followed all the workouts, I did all my homework, I did exactly what I was supposed to do. Did you leave out the fact that you decided that the weather was nice, so you spent 7 hours in the garden? You climbed ladders, you cleaned out the gutters, you did all kinds of other things, okay? Think of all the other activities you're doing, especially now that a lot more workload goes on that you haven't been doing for the last 3 or 4 months, okay? So those are the kinds of things that keep in mind what the aches and pains may have been coming from, not necessarily from the walking or running, okay? If something starts hurting, something starts developing, we called the 40, and Susan had it in the handouts, the 48 to 72 hour rule, okay? When you notice that something's hurting, definitely around an ankle or a knee or hip, back, those joints, when things hurt, see if over the course, you notice that things are hurting on Tuesday, say, okay? Wednesday, it still hurts. Thursday, now we're at 48 hours, okay? That's where you start thinking, okay, does it feel the same as it did on Tuesday, or has it gotten worse, or is it getting less sore? All right, so now between 48 and 72 hours, so Thursday, Friday, that 24-hour period, more often than not, a lot of aches and pains that come from running and walking, wow, was it my left knee or my right knee that was hurting, right? It just, you know, at the moment that it hurts or you start feeling something, you kind of, I can't stop now. I've been working so hard for so long, and I got this event coming up, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Well, backing off for 24 hours, thinking it through a little bit, letting that 48 to 72 hour rule kind of kick in. What happens between that second and third day is really important. If between the second and third day it increases in intensity, increases in pain and discomfort, then you really got to back off a bit, okay? But if during that second to third day, 48 to 72 hours, things back off a lot, or it doesn't hurt as much, or you're not, oh, it's almost feeling back to normal, then get right back into your regular routine, okay? Susan put the pain scale together. She likes talking about this part, so I'm going to let her jump in.
We talked about this. Breaks up the talk. Okay, so this 0 to 10 pain scale is on the update from this week. And basically, think of it as an accountability tool, not necessarily a pain scale. And so 0 is no pain at all. 10 is you're going to the emergency room. It's that bad. And so 1, 2, 3 is low. We'll color that green. And the idea is if it's low, you can keep doing what you're doing, but monitor how you're feeling. Just keep an eye on it. If it gets into 4, 5, 6, that's moderate. So slow down. Maybe back off on your intensity, how hard you go, back off on duration, how long you go, or back off on frequency, how many times per week. Back off some, but don't roll over and die. Don't become part of the couch. Don't stop completely. Do something, just modify. Modify how you're doing it. If it gets into 7, 8, 9, we're going to color that red. And so, stop, because it's only going to get worse. And so sometimes, if you were to ask yourself, what's my pain level? Or what's my level on that accountability tool? It does just that. It helps hold you accountable to not overdoing it. And so that's the 0 to 10 accountability tool. Because, yeah, I actually say it there. Okay? There you go.
So with that 48 to 72 hours that I was talking about, this is where you want to think things through, okay? If you're in that yellow zone, are you higher in the yellow, getting close to red, or lower in the yellow, getting close to green during that third day, all right? If things are hurting, I said water is definitely, hydration. The other magic cure is ice, okay? Don't be tempted if something's sore, especially muscles and tendons and joints, that, grab the heating pad, get some heat on there. There's inflammation, okay? The reason it hurts, the reason it's sore, the reason it's achy is something's inflamed there. So icing definitely always first option. The old, bag of frozen peas works, or crushing up ice, and where there's all kinds of different ice sleeves and things like that. It's amazing what 15 minutes of icing things down will do quickly. Just kind of dissipate things, get some inflammation out of there. Icing does two things. Number one, does tone down the inflammation, kind of deadens the nerve endings, so you don't feel that pain as much. And it also, after you ice, as your body warms back up, there's more blood going to that area. So it's a pumping mechanism. All right, you ice things down, things warm up, more blood goes to that area. So always think in terms of that. There's stuff that's legal in Oregon now that I just won't go into because I don't do any of that stuff. And just, I mean, use your judgment, speak with your medical professionals, and, you know, I wouldn't wing it on stuff that you don't know anything about. I used to put it that way. But there, you know, there's things that you can do that make you forget that there's pain. Always not a good idea. Okay? If there's pain, if there's achiness, if there's soreness, acknowledge it. Change your routine. Back off on the intensity, back off on the frequency, back off on the duration, and keep going. Okay? So, questions?
Is anybody experiencing any discomfort now to where they have already modified a little bit? Okay.
I switched my shoes.
You switched your shoes?
Yes, it was time.
Uh-huh. And that's another one that we've obviously already talked about, switching shoes. So let me just put it out there that if anybody has a question or a concern and you don't feel comfortable talking about it with the whole group here, we get that. You're more than welcome to come to the store and talk to me about it. I'm happy to help you problem solve a little bit. Or you can email me or call or whatever. Although I don't currently practice, I did do occupational therapy for 22 years, and we have, between the two of us, coached for a lot of years. And so we're around that quite a bit. So again, if in doubt, if you go for, like John was saying, if you go for that 48 to 72 hours and you're still having a lot of discomfort and you're not sure what to do, it might be time to seek medical intervention and see what's really going on. Because you don't want to get into a situation where you're prolonging the recovery and the healing and making a situation worse. And sometimes it's kind of hard to know, especially if you're relatively newer at the consistency of walking and running. And speaking of that, I will also remind everyone, and John has said this before, that one of the things that can contribute to conditions or injuries is sporadic training. So taking time off and then getting back into it, taking time off and getting back into it, and not doing the consistency that we've been talking about. Because sometimes we have this thinking, well, I took time off. He said it was okay to take time off. Now I'm going to get right back into it. And our brains remember where we used to be, but our body's not ready to just jump right in yet. Sometimes after having taken time off, we need to build back up again. Start slowly, increase gradually, and give ourselves some grace. And don't kick ourselves for taking that time off. Just be wise and patient about getting back into it to try and slowly and gradually build that foundation back up. So with that,
Well, let me jump in
I
on
have a
that.
question.
Okay.
If you have, let's say that you tripped on a curb and you twisted your ankle.
Mhm.
You ice it first? Is there like a rule for this? Like you ice
Yeah.
it for so long?
let's repeat that.
How,
Yeah.
So the question is what happens if you do trip or twist your ankle or that kind of thing? Icing first is a great idea, especially the first 3 days.
ice on for 15 minutes, off, Like
Yeah,
while you're
part of how long you ice depends on the method, because if you take a paper cup, fill it with water, and freeze it, then you can use that paper. You can have something to hold on to, and you massage your area with that, basically an ice cube. That's going to get cold because you're putting ice directly on it. That's going to get cold a whole lot faster, depending on it. If it's like your butt muscle, which is bigger, versus an ankle, which doesn't have a lot of meat on it or fat on it, something close to the joint, you have to be careful. Versus if you're using a bag of frozen peas, then yeah, you could probably put it on for 20 minutes because it's not gonna, or if you have a dampened washcloth, and a ice bag, depending on how intense the ice bag is, you have to be careful so you don't get freezer burn, is what I'm saying. So depending on the methodology of how you ice, that's gonna and where you're icing, here versus here, that's gonna partially determine. And so if it starts to get numb, that's probably time to take that ice off. If it starts to burn, you may have gone a little too far. But that's a great question.
Yeah,
how long and how frequent? Yeah.
When you ice and things get real red, that's time to stop and let the blood flow come back. So.
And that's for like 3 days, you said, right? Icing?
Yeah, that's the routine definitely I would do.
Okay.
And you could definitely ice 2 or 3 times a day.
Great.
I think sometimes people say, yeah, ice it 7 times because they know people aren't going to ice it that many times. Use some common sense and be reasonable about it. Yeah.
But back to one of the things Susan was just talking about, if you're off for a couple of weeks, whether it's an injury or a vacation or you just got out of the routine for a few weeks, think about week 1 versus week 7 in the Prince's Steps progression. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. It's a big jump between weeks 1 and 7. All right. So if you take 2 or 3 weeks off, like I said, vacation, something just you got out of the routine. Back off 2 or 3 weeks because you're going to build back up. Okay. Go back to week 2 or back to week 3 instead of, okay, I left off at week 7, so now and I missed a week, so I'll go to week 9. That's not going to work. Okay. You want to go back a few weeks, build back up again. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure I addressed that fairly clearly in this week's update. What if, should I still have a back off week if I haven't been doing anything or I haven't been consistent? It kind of depends on why you weren't consistent. And that, again, I'm not going to go into it again now because it's written pretty clearly on the update. But again, you guys are doing awesome. Keep up the good work. Take advantage of this awesome sunshine and the great weather. And again, thank you for hanging in there through all of that wetness and rain. And go out there and let's enjoy it. All right. Woo!